With the appearance of Doomsday in Batman v Superman, it got me thinking about that time he killed the Man of Steel in 1992. It was a massive event in the comic book world, and even just in pop culture at the time. Superman died. That's a big deal. But what if Superman was secretly killed before that and stayed dead for decades without any of us noticing? Before Superman faced off against Doomsday in Superman number 75 from 1992, a curious story was written by Walt Simonson. Reportedly, this story was supposed to come out in 88 or 89 as an Adventures of Superman annual, but DC was trying to avoid those at this particular point in time, which is why Adventures of Superman Annual number 1 was released in 1987, but issue 2 wasn't released until 1990. The story would eventually be published as a one-shot Superman special comic right before the big Doomsday event when Superman would bite the dust. In this story, Lex Luthor is trying to synthesize kryptonite to use against Superman. The experiment abruptly ends in a large explosion with enough force to send Supes barreling into a mound of rock and sand. Bad news for Lex, the process didn't work. What he believed to be synthetic kryptonite was really just lead that Superman eats because he really wants to rub in Lex's failures. Like a jerk. But hey, it's not all bad news for Luthor. Later that night, that pile of sand that Superman crashed into comes alive! Apparently, the explosion irradiated the ground, granting it sentience and the ability to steal Superman's powers. Comic books. One by one, the sand creature started stealing Superman's powers. Heat vision, flight, super strength. He even started taking on the appearance of Superman. Finally, Supes leads the creature back to the Fortress of Solitude, away from civilians. The only power he has left is invulnerability, but the sand creature won't take that away until Superman begs him for death. With the creature now looking identical to the Man of Steel, and with almost all of his powers, Superman only has one move left. What's happening here? Is he kissing the sand creature? You gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. Honestly, this is where the comic starts to become difficult to decipher. It looks like Superman is transferring his last remaining energy into the sand creature, but not just his energy, his memories, and his morals and ideals. For all intents and purposes, Superman effectively transferred his consciousness into this doppelganger. When the creature sees that the real Superman has died, he's overcome with grief. Superman swore an oath not to kill. Suddenly, something happens. It's not very clear. There's a powerful explosion, and that's it. We don't really see what happens next. The story does pick up later when Lex Luthor arrives at work, believing the sand creature finally did what he never could. Superman is dead, and Lex doesn't have to worry about that big blue Boy Scout messing up his plans anymore. But who's there to greet Luthor in his office? That's right, Mr. Outside Underwear himself. Or at least, that's what we're led to believe. You see, Superman explains to Lex that the only way to stop the sand creature was to let it fully become Superman. Not just Superman's powers or looks, but his mind. He never goes into any detail about what happened, though. We're supposed to believe that the doppelganger restored Superman at the sacrifice of its own life, but we don't know if that's something that it's even capable of. Simonson's story was an homage to Denny O'Neil's Superman run from the 70s, which had its own sand doppelganger named Cormer. You can even see some panels and dialogue lifted almost directly from those pages. It was just supposed to be a fun, standalone story, not connected to anything at all. But boy, did they underestimate us comics fans. This is when fan theories come into play. The idea is that the real Superman really did die that day. The sand creature absorbed all of Superman's powers and took up the mantle for itself. There are a few variations on what happens next, but the most popular one I've seen is that every Superman story between this special and the Flashpoint event when the DC Universe got rebooted again did not feature the real, true Man of Tomorrow. Only this sand Superman. Okay, I know that this sounds about as crazy as Jar Jar Binks being a Sith Lord, but it's supported by a good bit of evidence and, admittedly, a lot of speculation. For starters, we know that Superman could easily be replaced by the sand creature because it not only absorbed his powers, but also his memories. That's proven in a few key scenes when the creature suddenly knows that Superman's alter ego is Clark Kent. When it recognizes Jimmy Olsen for the first time, it sees him and even recalls how Superman decorated the fortress with statues at the beginning of the issue, even repeating the same words Clark spoke. As it's explained at the end of the book, the creature fully became Superman. Following that vague explosion, if the creature was the one who walked away, then it might not even know that it's not the true Superman. This theory also lays out a handful of other weird things going on with Superman at the time, like him not reacting to kryptonite or magic as strongly as he used to, the idea that there are a few separate occasions when Superman was weakened but couldn't regain his powers from the sun, as the theory states that the Sand Superman isn't actually powered by the sun anyway, but rather by absorbing energy from large explosions, just like how the sand creature was formed in the first place. But the most interesting piece of evidence comes from the Dead Again story arc. So we all know that Superman died at the hands of Doomsday and eventually came back to life with a sick mullet, right? The Dead Again story takes place almost immediately after all that. Superman was fighting a villain called the Conduit, and their battle led them to Superman's memorial site, where they smashed into his tomb to find what appears to be the dead body of Superman. But if Superman really is still dead, then who is the guy that's been flying around saving the day with that ridiculous haircut? The mystery surrounding this dead body is a complicated one to unravel, and brings up a lot of questions about what it truly means to be someone. Clark reflects on this thinking, what makes a person who he is, or what he is? If I'm not Superman, am I still Clark Kent? If I'm not Kent, who am I? Or what? Tests at Star Labs confirmed that the dead body truly is the real Superman. Clark started losing his mind, screaming about how he doesn't know what's true anymore. After determining that none of his villains are behind this, he tries to come to terms with the fact that if the real Superman is dead, then he must be an imposter. And what a twist that would be, right? Revealing that the Superman fans have been reading for the past few years has actually been a kind of clone the whole time. Why does that sound familiar? If you didn't know, during the same time, Marvel was doing a very similar story, taking their most popular hero, introducing some clonage, and making us question whether the Spider-Man we've been following was even the real Peter Parker, or just an imposter. The theory explains that the Dead Again story is when DC planned on revealing the truth, but Marvel kind of beat them to it. So instead, DC changed the story to reveal that none of it was real. It was just Brainiac making the entire world hallucinate. There was no body found in Superman's tomb after all. And possibly after seeing the reaction to the Clone Saga at Marvel, DC decided not to go through with the reveal. They just waited until the Flashpoint event rebooted the universe and all of their comics and characters. But until that point in 2011, the Superman readers have been following since the late 80s was supposedly a fake. It is a great theory. Honestly, I love it. There's just one minor flaw with it. It's not true. Walt Simonson, the writer and artist of the Superman special with the Sand Creature, explained, quote, "All I can really say about this matter is that nothing I could say would be as interesting as the theory." Superman writer at the time, Jerry Ordway, was a little bit more blunt about it, saying, quote, "Think this is fun fan speculation, but not true at all. So then why is this theory even worth talking about?" Personally, it reminds me of the Darth Jar Jar theory, in that it feels like an attempt by the fans to try and enjoy something that wasn't very enjoyable. To many, the 90s were the worst time of not just Superman with his mullet and red and blue energy powers and stories that forced you to read 4 different titles simultaneously, but of comics in general. Maybe this theory could allow for comics fans who didn't like the Superman comics of the 90s to read through these bizarre tales with a new perspective. The theory attempts to defend these stories by trying to convince us that this Superman was never really Superman at all. The one that fans knew and loved died before all the craziness started happening. We can then blame all the weird stuff on some clone, knowing that the true Man of Steel is dead after sacrificing his own life to save the world from a creature with all of Superman's powers, but none of Superman's soul. So I have 2 questions for you guys today. Number 1, did Superman really die before his battle with Doomsday? Despite what the official word is, what do you adopt into your own headcanon? Number 2, do you think that this theory's goal was specifically for the fans of Superman who didn't much care for his adventures in the 90s as a way of defending the character? Or was it simply, hey, wouldn't this be neat? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want more videos about the Man of Tomorrow, we got an entire playlist you can binge watch right here about his powers, history, the trick behind how his disguise works, and more. And if you're a fan of comic book theories like this one, we've got a bunch more of our own that you can watch. Which character is Stan Lee playing in all of his Marvel cameos? Could Batman be a literal Dark Knight? Is Deadpool secretly a mutant? Find out by clicking here or the links in the description below. And make sure you hit that big sexy subscribe button so you don't miss out on all the new videos we make for you every week that explore the history, science, art, and philosophy behind your favorite comic book superheroes. My name is Scott, reminding you to read between the panels and grow smarter through comics. See ya.